David is the #1 hooker at the 105 kilos category. His inside game is too overpowered in comparison to his size and weight. Devon and David are completely contrasted in styles. Devon being the one who runs away from the opponent, and David is the one who brings the opponent to his hook. Devon talked a lot about taking the 105 kilos belt when Todd Hutchings was 105 kilos champ, but Terzi didn't want an West versus West match. Devon is a master at manipulating the setup. He will take everything from David before they go. He will already be rising and pulling back, putting so much pressure into David's wrist and fingers that he will keep him flat. It's going to be very difficult to set up a hook. Unless David is prepared to play those games, the match will stop at center. David will blow his load and just lay down every round. Everything about the setup needs to be neutral. Firm holding is fine, but Devon loads too much. As a top roller, if someone starts turning your palm up and you lose your pronation, there's no going back from that position. At that point, you have to defend in a hook. Now, if you know he's going to try to hook you, set up in a low hand top roll, don't let him get a good purchase on the back of your hand. As they're about to say ready go, start loading back pressure and start letting him feel that pressure on his bottom two fingers. And when they say go, you hit all the way to the back of the pad while also pronating, obviously. This puts you in a defensive position since you're trying for him not to turn your palm up. From there you work on cracking his wrist back a bit before you surge sideways. But then again, if you're not strong enough, you won't be even able to do this. They'll just cup you in center table and you're done so. Cupping doesn't fight pronation alone. It's pronation and back pressure which makes it a more even fight. If you are practicing at the table and try to keep your pronation with no back pressure, you will lose your pronation easily. If you lose pronation in a hook, you will get turned over on your bicep and your opponent can use their whole arm wrestling chain against only your bicep, and unless there is a massive strength gap, the person who is relying just on their bicep will most likely lose. Back pressure can counter side pressure, you just need to angle yourself that way. See Devon's matches when he regularly used to open top roll or king's move. Most arm breaks happen when people go for the pin without establishing hand control first. For example, Zurab was in a supinated position and doesn't have his wrist flexion engaged. He tries to rotate his shoulder to pin, but his hand got left behind because of the lack of hand purchase. Look at Todd Hutchings. Even though it may seem like he just goes straight sideways, he actually has the better rise and roll most of the time. Cup only prevents your opponent from climbing if you have a deep grip. But he never takes a deep grip with other top rollers, which is who he actually needs to prevent from climbing. He still loses his cup regularly when on defense like against Georgie, and when attacking against a top roller with side pressure like against Dinas. I'm sure it got stronger overall recently, just like other parts of his hand, but I don't think that's the key to the success of his style. Devon has a talent for maintaining static pressure from a much wider variety of angles than any other arm wrestler. For instance, he effectively leaves no opening when transitioning to press. Having this flexibility allows him to be dominant in a variety of situations, which also lets him make strategic choices that can help him get a pin more efficiently rather than wasting energy to get the pin. When Devon goes against a top roller, such as Georgie, it looks like Devon takes a lower and deeper grip in the setup to neutralize the possibility of Georgie busting out a flop press. This made it harder for his wrist to hold up to Georgie's pronation, but Devon trusted that his own pronation and back pressure would hold. The real concern was Georgie taking him B-side and then flopping, thus being ready for the flop was more important than just securing the highest grip at the start. Devon preaches efficiency. Force your opponent to expend more energy attacking than it requires for you to defend. It's why he is able to outlast his opponents, even ones that are 20 years his junior. Once he has complete control of a fatigued opponent, he can use whatever technique he wants without sustaining as much wear and tear on his arm. Devon grips low on his opponent's hand even if he wants to play an outside move. He always advises to cover the thumb knuckle when top rolling. When he defends a powerful hit, his fingers immediately slip off his thumb. This results in two outcomes, one in the opponent's favor and the other in Devon's favor. It puts less pronation torque on the opponent's last chain, the fingers. But it also puts Devon's riser in a more efficient position. The low grip provides more finger stability to the rise through the index and middle fingers, and they start to attack the opponent's ring and pinky fingers in purely back pressure vector, in other words, direction. Covered thumb knuckle provides significant pronation pressure, but less riser pressure. As his opponent extends his arm to the max, his fingers become useless. As you can notice here, his fingers are floating in the air, while the torque is applied from the back of his extended wrist. The wrist extension thing, or the kickback, as Devon calls it, puts additional torque on his own ligament, the ulnar one. And that's basically the way he trains for the pronation lift. I bet he's the only arm wrestler who can lift 75 kilos with an extended wrist, as it puts nearly 15% more torque on the pronator muscles. The whole point of the lift is to keep the wrist a bit bent and not let the weight turn your palm up. A cup just defeats the purpose of the lift. The normal anatomy of the top roll is that the pronation strength transmits through the thumb and knuckle. So what are the benefits of putting the fingers around the opponent's hand circumference? Well, basically the index and middle fingers are important for pronation stabilization. The fingertips are conveying the pronation force on a wider part on the opponent hand, near the thumb pad. To get a more clear idea, just look at the multi-spinner. It's nearly impossible to engage pronation without containing the tool with your fingers. You can notice that Devon's fingers here are leaving a hollow space underneath them, making a 90 degrees angle with Devon's hand. This angle allows the pronation force to be applied at right angle, which is the most effective. It's different from fully containing the opponent's hand without leaving a space underneath. High grip is for pronation, but low grip gives more preference to rise. When the stronger opponent hits, the other arm wrestler's fingers will immediately slip off the thumb. They will attack a thicker portion of the opponent's hand, which is a disadvantage for your pronation. In terms of riser, this grip not only gives better position for fingers to rise, but also gives them room to contain the other arm wrestler's wrist. I don't see Devon rising through the opponent's wrist with his own knuckle. It's from his index finger. A known physical rule is that the longer lever needs more force to move for a specific range of motion. Riser gives additional height to the already long arm of Devon, but he doesn't need to contract his muscles harder to compensate, because his riser and the rest of his arm act as separate entities. Cutting 15 kilos is insane and not healthy. Even David, who had to cut like 10 kilos, said he loses a lot of strength and feels very unhealthy. Odds are Devon's gonna win, but if David wants to beat Devon, it has to be by dealing with that pronation or having a cup strong enough to hook Devon without losing that wrist. Denis is a level above Daikian in every practice video. Even with a weight cut, which could be entirely a water cut, Devon can't be in very much danger.